You're listening to a special interview segment for the official podcast for WrestlingNewsSource.com.
Okay, folks, joining us on the show this week, another member of the WWE Hall of Fame class of 2004, Greg the Hammer Valentine. Mr. Valentine, welcome to the show.
Good evening, gentlemen, and thank you for that.
Thank you for allowing us to interview you. You'll be appearing at the Clutch City Productions Super Show along with Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, X-Pac, last week's guest, Tito Santana, Brutus the Barber Beefcake, among many others, on August 31st out at the Pasadena Convention, located at 7902 Fairmont Parkway in Pasadena, Texas. For more information on that, go to clutchcityproductions.com. And, Mr. Valentine, you've, been at several different conventions and stuff like that. Are you getting excited about this one?
Yeah, I do a lot of stuff up the East. I'm down the East Coast in Chicago and places in Los Angeles, but I haven't been to Houston for a while, except for the WrestleMania several years ago. I was there.
Very nice. And, what are your thoughts on getting to meet some of the fans who knew you yesteryear, who have, since grown up, had some kids, and now their kids are sort of getting to find out who you are?
Yeah, thank goodness for DVD and WWE 24/7, where they can watch a lot of the stuff. Plus, YouTube has a lot of stuff on there too. But it's real exciting. And for years and years when I was wrestling, we were locked up in the dressing room, and we never got to meet our fans. Mm-hmm. Now here we are, 10, 20 years later, getting to meet all the fans that we had. And you know what? Just about everybody, I've never had a heckler or person say anything bad to me. I mean, it's just like they all love the legends, and I'm just glad to be part of it.
Absolutely. And, speaking of you two, we were actually watching your infamous dog collar match with Roddy Piper before we got the interview going. Could you take us through some of your thoughts before that matchup, and did you think it would obtain the legendary status that it got, after the matchup?
Well, I was wrestling for the National Wrestling Alliance, NWA, and back then, and it was really big. It was probably just as big as the WWF back then, and it was actually the first pay-per-view for wrestling, but it wasn't, you couldn't get it in your home. You had to go to a closed circuit situation type theater thing. And the Greensboro Coliseum, it held maybe 18, 19, that's stretching it, people there. But, it was Piper's idea to bring this dog collar in. And I'm looking at this thing and I go, how are we going to pull this off? And but we did. And we wanted to make a statement that we really wanted to steal the show, because the other main event was Flair against Harley Race for the world title. We were the United States. We had that belt up. I was a champion at the time. But it wasn't really a title match, because it was so obscure. This was actually the first ever hardcore match, and that was before they used that term, hardcore. Mm-hmm. But we made a statement. We hurt each other. We did it for the fans because we wanted them to believe in it. We wanted to make a statement. And you know what? Like you said, that dog collar match stood the test of time.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I can't imagine being in that sort of match where it's just like the slightest yank. They even said in the during the commentary of the match, just the slightest pull the wrong way could seriously injure your neck. And I'm really glad that y'all were able to pull that match off. No, with the exception of Mr. Piper's ear, the eardrum bursting. No serious.
Yeah, that was the year of the year. I titled that. And poor Roddy, Roddy was a little bit lighter than me. I think he was, 235, maybe soaking wet, and I was around 250, a little stouter, and I had that big neck, so it really didn't bother me so much. But Roddy's a real trooper. He was a Golden Glove boxer. I'm sure you weren't aware of that. He won that title up in Canada, and so a tough guy. So, you know, it was a brutal match. And the match, you know, when I watch it, sometimes I show some friends at parties and stuff, and they watch that thing, and, you know, I didn't realize it went almost 45 minutes. You know, it was a long match.
Yeah, and you know, very brutal indeed. And your hits are just so hard. You know, like, you know, you didn't pull them. Very stiff punches, especially in your feud with Tito Santana. It's considered one of those legendary feuds. It lasted over a year. Your matches together, you know, considered one of the hardest hitting. You know, can you take us through what it was like working with Tito? Because I know I've heard in past interviews, you know, one would hit the other as hard as they could, and you know, y'all would just slug it out.
Well, Tito was, you know, he was a little greener than I was. I'd already been in the main events a lot down the NWA, and when I went to New York and several different times, and finally in 1985 we had this match, and I broke his leg, and then we went back, and you know, he had his return matches against me, and the people were really behind it. It was very intense feud, and Tito knew the way I like to wrestle. I like to lay him in. And so he just, you know, he went with it. A lot of guys, if I can't lay him in, I can't have a good match, because I was taught by my father, Johnny Valentine, and everybody in Houston knows Johnny Valentine. He was a legend everywhere, but especially in Houston at the old Sam Houston Coliseum, and Paul Blosch, the promoter, and all that. And, you know, so I was trained by my father. That's just the way I rolled. And, you know, if I couldn't hit somebody, I couldn't have a match with him. And Piper hung in there, just like, I mean, we're talking about Tito. Tito hung in there, just like all my other, you know, Ronnie Garvin, all my other feuds, the Bulldogs. You know, if I could lay him in, if I could do what I wanted to do, you know, it just they were brutal matches. They were like dog fights, but they were also wrestling matches, and I love Tito Santana for putting up with that, and plus he hit me hard too. So.
That's awesome.
Very nice. And you know, you've had a few feuds that have lasted, you know, such a long time. I believe the blow off for Piper was after 2 years of y'all feuding. The you know, off and on, but the one with Tito Santana lasted over a year, with the blow-off being the cage match. What are your thoughts on feuds nowadays not having much longevity anymore, you know, with everything feeling rushed?
Yeah, my thoughts are, you know, I go back, I'm usually invited every year to go to the WrestleManias, and I enjoy that, but that seems like they're all hyped up and ready to go. But when I watch this stuff on Monday nights and stuff like that, I hate to knock the wrestling part of it, because I know they're all working real hard, and sometimes I do, you know, see some good matches, but it's a lack of intensity, it's a lack of storylines that people can follow, and they jump around too much on the titles. You know, like when I had a title, I had it a year or 2 years. I mean, it's just, who's the champion? You know, it's either John Cena or someone else, you know.
The next transition.
They lack the intensity.
Yeah. And
it's a shame, you know.
Yeah, and we asked this question to Mr. Santana as well. You know, with the importance of the Intercontinental Championship during your time in WWE, you know, as compared to what they do now, sort of just a transitional champion. You know, like the Intercontinental Championship had such an importance. Like this is going to be the next guy, and now it's kind of just tossed around. Like, do you feel that it devalues that championship a little bit with them doing that?
Absolutely, too. I mean, when the NWA and WCW were all bought up by Vince McMahon, and he brought everything in, and now he's got the United States title. I mean, I don't even know who's the United States champion. That was like the number 2 championship belt after the NWA World title. So that meant a lot, and my father had that a lot, and I had it 4 times. It was a prestigious belt. And the Intercontinental belt, first time I think the first champion was Pat Patterson, who was a very good wrestler. Then Don Morocco had it. Then he had that feud with Snuka. Snuka had it. And Tito finally got it from Morocco. And then I was the next in line. And then on and on. Ultimate Warrior had that title. I believe Piper had it for a while. It was the number 2 title, and it's a shame that I don't even the World Tag Team belts nowadays. I mean, when Beefcake and myself had those tag titles against the Bulldogs, we didn't have to have Hulk Hogan on the card wherever we were at to sell out. All we had to you put the Dream Team on top against the British Bulldogs, and it was an instant sellout because they were intense. They were intense matches, just like the ones I have with the other guys. The Bulldogs were great, and it's just, it's the same thing. It's just, I hate to keep repeating myself, but we made those titles mean something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was also one of those things about, sort of tapping into your character, developing your character, whereas nowadays they have writers. They come out and say, okay, you're going to come out and say this, and this is where your character is going to go, as opposed to, seeing, a character develop. What are your thoughts on writers in wrestling?
Oh, I don't like it at all, and they're Hollywood writers, and they're young. I'm not knocking them because they're young, but they are young. And they don't understand this wrestling business. What they should do is have guys like myself, other people that understand this wrestling business. And, I remember when I broke into the business in the 70s. And, I'm 21, 22 years old. And all the guys that were on top they were 40, all of them almost 50 years old. And I thought, gee, these guys are really old. But you know what? That was the deal. That was because it took 7-8 years to really be a polished worker, a polished wrestler. Mm-hmm. And they were basically teaching the young guys how to take over and pass the torch to them. Now that doesn't happen anymore. You got a few older guys in there like The Undertaker, and they keep a couple guys like that around, but that's it. They don't pass the torch the right way. Mm-hmm. And that's what's wrong with it.
I know earlier you said you still follow the product. Is there anyone on the roster that you think can go toe-to-toe with you in your prime?
Well, yeah. I mean, physically, these guys, I'm not knocking them physically. I'm just talking about the psychology and grabbing a hold and the intensity. But my favorite, because I love his father, is Cowboy Bob Orton Jr. I love the way his kid works because he's old school all the way. I'm speaking of Randy Orton. And, John Cena is just like, he's good and everything, but I think it's overkill. I like The Rock. I used to wrestle with his father, Rocky Johnson. He's old school too. So some of those guys still have it because they're second generation. It's inherited in there. There's something there that comes through, and they get it, mm-hmm. and they have that it factor. And there's the it factor is how you draw money and how the people love to come and watch you wrestle, whether you're a good guy or a bad guy. And there's not a lot of guys with that it factor going.
Is there any of the younger talent that ask you for advice?
Yeah, but I still do independence and I still get in the ring. Not as much, but I actually got in the ring 3 times last month, and they're all very respected. The independents that I don't do anything for WWE or TNA, but the independents that I do are good shows. We just did one up in Notre Dame, and we had 2,000 people. Tito was on that card. The Barbarian was on that card, and Cowboy Bob. But all those guys, the most respect, and they come back and say, did you watch my match? And sometimes I feel bad because I didn't watch the match. But, yeah, they always ask us, and you know, we're glad to help out. You
mentioned earlier about how, you know, fans would come to see good guys. They would come to boo the bad guys. Do you feel like, you know, do you feel like kayfabe is dead now because of social media? Like they'll go on the Today Show and they'll make comments about, you know, how much fun they have, but then they go on to Raw where they're supposed to be booed, but it's, you know, it feels like it's hard to boo this person when you see their you know, more normal side.
Well, yeah, you touched on the subject that I've been touching on. The intensity's gone because, you know, a lot of people think, oh, you know, they're a bunch of actors and they're acrobats, and that being said, you know, that takes away from the intensity. I prided myself by making the first row believe my match and believe who I was and believe in me and believe in my opponent, because that's what drew money. I didn't BS the people. I that's the way the business is built, and Johnny Valentine built it that way too. They came to see the bad guy get beat, and they believed it. I mean, there was still some non-believers, but most of the people bought a ticket because they believed in it. And it was a lot more believable. I mean, you can go to a movie and sit down and forget about everything and the bills and all this other bad stuff that's going on in your life, or even good stuff, and you can sit down, and if that movie is intense and it keeps you, it keeps your attention, you love it. That's the way we did it with our matches. Now, you know, you go to a bad movie, you get up and leave. You go to a bad wrestling match, you get up and go get some popcorn, you know. So, you know, it's just, I always thought that they would get back to the way it used to be, but on certain matches, you know, there's some matches that are really good, but you know, yet again, you know, you got 3 hours of wrestling on Monday night and an hour. I think there's an hour on tonight somewhere, and then 2 hours or whatever it is on Friday. I think there's too much. I think they give the product away too much on television, and maybe the 3 hours, maybe they can't think up enough stuff to make it interesting. You know, it's too much television.
Yeah, it's quite a bit of oversaturation for some, but
and a pay-per-view every month. You know, I mean, we had a pay-per-view 4 times a year, and you could build your product and build that you know, the storylines and stuff, and build up to that blow-off that you'd have at WrestleMania or SummerSlam or Survivor Series, Royal Rumble. That was it. Now there's so many that you can't keep up, and then the other company, forget about it. They don't get ratings anyway.
You know, wrestling has always been in your blood. Being a second-generation superstar, was there anything you might have wanted to be if not a wrestler when growing up?
Oh, well, I love the rock and roll business, and I wanted to be a DJ at a radio station, and because I grew up in Los Angeles, and I grew up around all those AM, FM radio stations and those shock jocks and all that, and I thought I wanted to do that, and I had the voice for it, but, you know, I went on the road with my dad one time in Texas for about 3 months, and that was it. I knew what I wanted to do.
Caught the bug.
Yeah.
And, you know, it all accumulated to a Hall of Fame career. You were inducted in the WWE Hall of Fame in 2004. What were your thoughts when you got the call for that?
Actually, I was out in Phoenix, and I don't remember exactly what I was doing out there, but I got a call from Vince McMahon himself, and I hadn't talked to him in, you know, several years. You know, I left the WWE in good terms. You know, I'm a good businessman, but it was time to get out of there. He said, "Would you like to be in the Hall of Fame?" I said, "Are you kidding?" I said, "I didn't even, you know, they had it a few years, and then they stopped it.
Right.
And then they started it back up. And in 2004, and they had about 10 of us guys going at the same time. Jesse Ventura, Don Morocco, Junkyard Dog, who had passed away, Big John Studd, Bobby Heenan. I mean, man, it was fantastic, and it was a great phone call, and I was on a real natural high, and they brought my wife and I up there and to New York, and it was in Madison Square Garden too. It was WrestleMania 20, which made it even better because that was one of the first breaks I really got. 1979 when I wrestled Bob Backlund there, and it was a good, real, it was. I was I was humbled, and I loved it, and I also thought, well, I deserve this, but I was still humbled, and that's one thing that you wrestle all those years, and sometimes you think, well, nobody really cares at the end of it, but that showed me that they did,
Has there been anyone that you've worked with that you're kind of shocked that they have not been in the Hall of Fame yet?
Yeah, it's funny. There's some big names out there that deserve to be in there. One of them is my partner, Beefcake. Mm-hmm. Still call him my partner because we still wrestle together too. He deserves it. And Jake the Snake Roberts would be another one that I would say would deserve it. It's hard to think right now, all the guys popping in my head, but those two stand out to me because I see them a lot, and I think they deserve it a lot more than. I'm not going to mention names. I don't want to be a name dropper, but a lot more than some of the people they put. I mean, come on, why would you put Donald Trump in there? He doesn't need that, Yeah. Some silly stuff,
Mm-hmm.
But him and Vince are good buddies, so.
Yeah, I got to have that celebrity wing.
Some of them. I mean, I loved it that Pete Rose got in there the same year. He's not a wrestler, but he came around for 4 different WrestleManias, and come on, he should be in the Baseball Hall of Fame. So, and I met him one time over in Japan. I thought he was a swell guy, and he was one hell of a Charlie Hustle. He was a hell of a baseball player. And, so some of those guys I think deserve it,
And with the work that Jake the Snake Roberts is putting in, he's trying to make a campaign to enter the Royal Rumble for next year. I'm sure you would love to see that.
Absolutely, Jake. He's had a lot of demons, had a lot of troubles, but he was one hell of a draw. He was one hell of a wrestler. Great interviews, and he was very intense when he wrestled. His father was a great man, Grizzly Smith, who's no longer with us, but one of the nicest guys, and he was kind of like an agent on the road with us. And, he deserves it. Come on,
absolutely. Also considered one of the better talkers, one of the greatest psychological wrestlers out there in the business.
Yeah, he had that it factor going.
Was there anyone that you that you traveled with on a regular basis? Did you have any interesting stories for that?
Well, we haven't covered the Ric Flair feud that I had where I broke his. We were world tag team champions a couple different times together, NWA, and then we had a feud where I hit him over his nose with a cane and actually broke his nose for real.
Wow.
But we had some crazy road trips that I can't even say. I can't talk about the content of them, but he was like a real ride. He's quite a character, Ric Flair.
Oh, he's still doing it though. So.
Yeah. He's out there.
Must be great to have lived in that time, and you get to
Me and Brutus had a lot of great trips together too. Even before we were champions together, we were friends down in the Carolinas and stuff, and I had a lot of trips with Hogan too. So we like to kind of stick to each other and be on the road together because we were close, and it's good to have these friends. It's like old high school buddies hanging out together,
Mm-hmm. Reliving the good times.
Yeah.
And it'll be good because you'll get to relive those times with all the fans coming out to Clutch City Productions, the Super Show. It's going to be taking place August 31st out of the Pasadena Convention Center, located 7902 Fairmont Parkway. Mr. Valentine, it has certainly been a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you.
And we look forward to seeing you out at Clutch City.
Okay, guys. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Have a good night.
Okay, bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.